What if a golden figure older than empires, the emperor of mankind, stepped through a wound in reality and arrived in Middle-earth at the dawn of the War of the Ring? A being forged in unyielding reason enters a world authored by song and providence. Would he break Sauron with sheer will, or break the world by misunderstanding it? In this story, the Emperor arrives not as a conqueror, but as a test of power without worship, of wisdom without prophecy, and of whether destiny can bear the weight of a godless savior. The wound opens above the Bruinen like parchment torn by invisible fingers. It is not a natural storm. The light is too clean, the thunder too quiet, as if the air itself were being instructed to remember what breaking sounds like. He arrives kneeling, one gauntlet pressed into leaf loam, armor whispering with that subdued radiance that makes shadows behave. Pine resin and river spray meet the older perfumes carried in with him. Ozone, scorched gold, a suggestion of deserts and battlefields 1,000 lifetimes deep. He rises without hurry and takes in the valley's edge the way a medic takes a pulse. Temperature, humidity, wind path, slope lines, the tonality of birds. He listens farther, beyond sense. The unseen here has no warp stench, no demon tide gnashing behind everything. It hums. It is structured. He notes it and, without smiling, is content. The Rangers do not announce themselves, but he has already counted them by the absence they make in the soundscape. 6 boots spreading on a crescent, arrows half drawn, one breathing shallow through an old break in the rib. Their fear is clean and functional, the sort that belongs to guardians rather than hunters. He lets them come. When they are close enough to see the sun dangling in his armor, close enough to feel someone older than cities stand without aggression, their shoulders ease as if a father had just entered the room and the house remembered order. The foremost speaks in a tongue he does not know for 3 syllables, and then he does know it. He skims the surface of intention, catches the grammar in the net of a mind bred for leadership, and answers in Westron with an accent that is already eroding. "What name do you carry, stranger?" the ranger asks, not quite lowering his bow. "None that will help you," he says, "but I am here to set my feet in the right direction." His voice is a calm instrument. It does not tell them to trust. It gives them room to decide to. A younger man on the right flinches as a branch shifts under his heel. The Emperor turns his head that way and sees blood dark at the boot seam. "You walked hard to get here," he observes. "The ford?" He gestures toward the river's roar. "Patrol line," the older ranger says, as if that explains anything. In truth, it explains everything. "You came out of the sky." "I came out of a mistake," he replies, and it is not a lie. He studies the water. The wards braided through the foam are delicate and exact, a lattice of thought laid by the meticulous. He can feel intelligence the way a sailor feels current. There is a hidden valley nearby, a place designed to keep its heart whole while the rest thins. He could stride there alone in a handful of minutes. He could cross this land in a day, as a line of light that objects refuse to impede. Instead, he lets the rangers escort him, because a world like this deserves to understand what walks upon it, and because hospitality is a better first word than conquest. They move under pines. Mist strings itself between trunks, catching in his aura and shedding like glass rain. One ranger coughs and smothers it. The Emperor angles his body to break wind for the man without calling attention to the kindness. On a rise, he pauses. The east is a bruise on the far horizon, a pressure at the edge of thought, the suggestion of an eye that is not a mind, but a habit of domination. He maps lines of road and army in his head without trying to stop himself, and immediately stops himself. Logistics can wait until he has learned the time signature of this place. At the ford, he stands a moment and watches the river flex. There is an argument in the water between gravity and intention is winning by consent rather than force. He steps through without getting wet because the river chooses not to touch him, or perhaps because he chooses not to disturb the river. The rangers see it and say nothing, which is a kind of reverence that does not embarrass him because it is really reverence for their valley's strength. Beyond, he feels the silent architecture of someone's labor, paths that look casual but are curated, blind corners placed to give host and guest both time to think. The rangers take him to a cliff edge where the valley opens like a kept promise. He lets the sight do what it does. Houses grow as if persuaded, not nailed into being. No smoke blackens the air. He feels the unseen here coil in protective grace, not against him, but around those within, and gauges his footprint before he makes it. "You will want to speak with our master," the lead ranger says. "I will," he answers, "and with your law master, if you keep one." They look at him differently then, not afraid, but adjusting categories. On the path down, he stops once more, because a wren has ceased singing mid-phrase, and because that sudden hush often announces danger. He listens. It is not danger. It is the unseen noticing him noticing it, as if the world were testing how he treats small things. He lets that test hang, and passes it by, not doing anything at all. The wren resumes. Night finds them near the edge of wards. They light no fire. He needs none. When the rangers sleep, he practices the oldest discipline he owns. He becomes very still and lets the universe speak first. He closes his eyes, not because it helps, but because it keeps his body honest. In the Imperium, to open oneself was to invite teeth. In this valley, to open oneself is to be handed a score. The unseen unfurls in phrases, not currents. A low ground of patience with clean intervals of pity ringing like distant bells. Themes of loyalty woven with a counter-melody of freedom that refuses to be subsumed. Courage not as blaze, but as sustained note. He recognizes structure and has the sudden, complex sensation of relief and grief intertwined. Relief because here, power has rules that do not shift under stress. Grief because he spent a continent of lives building a civilization in a sea that hated rules. He tests the boundary the way a scientist brushes a specimen with a feather. He extends his will, not the clamp used on demon princes, not the hammer that made war moons pause, but a directed attention that in other realms bends probability like grass. Here, the grass does not bend. It ripples and then settles unchanged. A thrush on a branch 3 trees away pauses, head tilted. The air makes a sound like silk learning to say no. He withdraws instantly. The refusal is not hostile, it is principled. It is the sound of an authored world declining to let him rewrite its sentence. He tries again, differently. He does not push. He asks, may a wounded thing be mended by alignment rather than imposition? He finds a torn leaf, small, ordinary violence, and places a fingertip near without touching. He builds within himself the theme of healing as it has been presented to him. Mercy, patience, untangling rather than cutting, and lets that theme resonate. The leaf's tear knits with lazy confidence. No light flares. The unseen does not protest because he is not adding a new note. He is humming along to one that already exists. He explores farther, walking in thought along the river's attention to itself. He senses distances like ideas. To the east, a will collected around absence, compelling obedience by simplifying the complexity of choice until only one answer remains. To the west and across the sea, something older than this world's crust, not watching him, not needing to, like the composer listening to a performance without leaning over the musician's shoulders. He does not try to make contact. Prudence is not fear. It is a respect for scales of being. He names to himself the beings he would in his own tongue call powers and angels, and then he lets those names fall away, because this world prefers its own. Emotions here do not decay into predators. In the warp, grief is a mouth. Here, grief is a line in the music that allows the next line to be honest. Rage is not a gate, but a warning. Love is not bait, it is the staff that holds the melody upright. He understands why tyrannies fail here with more drama than they do elsewhere. The song refuses monotony. Dissonance can heighten, can sharpen, but if it tries to smother, the score throws it out. He says the conclusion aloud, not because the sleeping rangers need to hear it, but because he does. Power will work only as harmony. The realization does not make him smaller. It makes him more precise. He inventories himself. What works in a singing world? Discipline, example, logistics that dignify courage instead of outsourcing it to machines. What fails? Shortcuts, spectacle, the hunger to be obeyed for its own sake. He takes a private oath he has taken before in worse places and broken only when survival demanded it, to keep his hands off the levers that singes the fingers of history. No engines, no thunder guns, no gifts the forest cannot metabolize. He will teach men to be better men. He will not offer them a way to be something else. He feels the East notice him at last, the way a watchman notices a new star that refuses to wheel with the others. The attention is heavy and impatient. He does not meet it. He is not hiding. He is refusing to conduct a conversation in the wrong language. If there must be a contest of wills later, it will be held on ground that protects small things. A skitter of thought brushes his mind from not far. A presence like a grey staff, like pipe smoke and laughter at the edge of loss. It does not pry. It nods, if presence can nod. He nods back in kind and lets the contact dissolve. He has walked across galaxies by making strangers into allies, only by not demanding alliance. In the dark, he examines the temptation he knows will come. The ring. He has not seen it. He has not heard its story. But this world's notes collect around a hole in the music, a negative instrument radiating a key of domination, and he understands its type before he has the artifact. Could he master it? Of course. Could he remain the person who refuses to be mastered by the need to master? Not in a world where the song prefers humility as its hero. He decides the answer now so he does not have to pretend to decide it later. Dawn unspools, slow and exact. The first light finds his armor and makes unfussy gold on the needles. The rangers wake lean and quiet. He returns to the surface of ordinary life like a diver breaking water without a splash. They move toward the hidden house. At a bend, a child of the valley appears on a path with a basket of herbs and looks at him with the pure curiosity that tyrants covet and ruin. He inclines his head as one sovereign to another. The child smiles without defense and skitters past. The world keeps singing. He crosses into the place where welcome is a craft. The air is different inside the wards, not safer, but more articulate. He walks with the rangers until hospitality takes over and guides him toward voices that will ask all the proper questions. He has his answers ready. Not conquest, not miracles, not a crown. A standard, perhaps. A refusal. A willingness to learn the rhythm before he lifts his hand. The chamber is built to keep the air honest. No pillars obstruct speech. No corners hoard whispers. Light comes down through high windows like patient counsel, laying itself across polished stone and the faces of those who have seen too much. A ranger with the look of returned kingship about him. A young hobbit whose courage doesn't know its own name yet. A dwarf measuring everything for weight and worth. An elf whose eyes have held stars longer than cities have held streets. A man from the south whose pride is anguish in armor. A grey pilgrim smiling as if grief were a companion who can be trusted to carry the other end of the load. At the table's center lies a small thing that eats attention. It is not bright. It is not impressive. It is merely final. The Emperor recognizes the pattern before the story is told. An artifact that turns will into debt and debt into a leash. A hinge upon which history tries to swing the same wrong door open again. Elrond invites the tale to be told, and the tale is told of the creature Gollum, of the finding in a quiet stream, of stolen birthdays and long shadows, of a wizard's doubt turned to certainty over maps and memories, of fire letters that name a purpose like a sentence passed. The Emperor listens without interruption. He notes what the room does around the telling, Legolas's stillness sharpening when Sauron's craft is named, Gimli's jaw set like a lock against fate, Boromir's breath hitching when Minas Tirith is mentioned, Aragorn's hands relaxed on the armrests in a discipline refined over years of refusing to fidget under prophecy. When the murmurs rise, solutions, shortcuts, the practical mind trying to bargain with doom, Boromir stands, a veteran's courtesy keeping his voice from climbing. By our valor, the White City still stands, he says, not boasting, reporting. But our strength is not without limit. Why not use this against the enemy? Why do the wise speak only of hiding or breaking it? If a weapon can be turned, then turn it. The Emperor could answer with metaphysics. He does not. He steps forward until he is within the conversational intimacy of every person present and addresses Boromir as if they were alone. You are not wrong to want relief, he says. You are wrong about the nature of this object. It is not a tool. It is a verdict waiting for a signature. Boromir's eyes flash, a man too intelligent to be comforted by platitudes. And yours is the hand that could sign and remain unbound? I could wear it, the Emperor admits with the softness of someone confessing an old proficiency. And for a season, enemies would break and skies would clear, and men would praise and sleep and lay down arms. And then the world would wake to a silence that felt safe because nothing living dared to disagree. The ring does not give strength. It collects obedience. It makes the living easier to organize and harder to love. Gimli grunts. Pretty words. How do you know? Because I have built engines that sorted entire peoples into categories of useful and not, he says without pride, without defense. Because I have seen victory that produced citizens who forgot how to stand without orders. Because I can feel, even now, how this thing wants to turn courage into compliance. I will not help it. A pause follows that isn't silence so much as recalibration. The hobbit shifts, a tiny sound, and the Emperor turns. Frodo's hand is near the ring, but not reaching. Sweat at the hairline, jaw clenched in quiet defiance. He has the look of someone holding a door shut, not for himself, but for his friends. The Emperor kneels, armored joints making the barest whisper, and sets his gaze level with Frodo's. "You are doing something everyone else in this room is too large to accomplish," he says. "You are letting the world remain complicated." Frodo huffs a breath that might be a laugh if it weren't busy being fear. "I don't want to. He stops. He doesn't know what he is doing it anyway. Elrond's eyes study the Emperor the way a historian studies a strange coin. Tested for wear, weight, counterfeit. "If not mastery, then what?" Elrond asks. "The sea is closing around us. If this is not a time for great instruments, when is such a time? When small instruments do the largest work," the Emperor says. He looks to the grey wizard. "You knew this already." Gandalf inclines his head. "I knew that if you arrived and found a lever long enough, you would refuse to pull it. That is why I allowed myself hope." Tempers begin to fray along predictable fault lines. The dwarf's impatience meeting the elf's long view. The man of Gondor's desperation colliding with the ranger's caution. The Emperor doesn't raise a hand. He lowers a temperature. "Let the argument finish," he says. "A plan that cannot survive anger has no right to ask for sacrifice." It finishes. It returns to the inevitability that Elrond perhaps knew before the council was called, but needed others to own. The ring must go where it was forged, not to be used, to be ended. The decision lands not as strategy, but as surrender to a logic that wants no fanfare. "Who will take such a thing?" Boromir asks, and there is relief in his voice despite himself. A dangerous relief, the kind men use to excuse later disobedience. The Emperor notes it, and chooses mercy now, so he may be firm later. Frodo raises his hand. The smallest gesture in the room becomes the largest fact in the world. Nobody breathes for a heartbeat. The Emperor does not bless him. He does not anoint the moment with poetry. He simply nods, as if a colleague has agreed to a difficult shift because someone must, and it happens to be his turn. "As for me," the Emperor says to the circle, standing again, "I will not touch it. I will not travel into the fire with the bearer. There is other labor. If this small company is to thread a needle through a watchful eye, then the rest of us must keep that eye squinting elsewhere. I will be a standard where standards help. I will teach where teaching does not deform. I will ask for nothing that you cannot return to your children with pride." "And what do you ask of us?" Elrond says, voice even. "That you remain yourselves," the Emperor answers. "And if I ever counsel anything that makes you less so, dismiss me." The council breaks slowly, like ice that's decided to become river again. People speak in pairs and threes. The Emperor lets conversation catch him like a net and be dragged by it from mind to mind. With Aragorn, he speaks of kingship not as glory, but as maintenance. "A crown is a set of chores," he says. "Are you willing to be bored for the peace of others?" "I have been bored in worse places," Aragorn answers, eyes bright with a humor that keeps men from making idols of him. With Legolas, he speaks of starlight and proximity to endings. Your people will depart one day, the Emperor says. No cruelty in it, only a respect for final chapters. Perhaps, Legolas replies. Perhaps not yet. The elf's gaze flicks to the hobbits, to a future he does not fear. With Gimli, he speaks of craft. If you wish men to stand, build them things that do not break when fear leans on them, the Emperor says. I need spearheads that do not shatter to show a soldier that he is not alone. Gimli's grin is a fortress with the drawbridge down. Aye, and I need captains who do not shatter when plans do. With Boromir, he speaks alone, at a window where banners stir. You love your city like a father who teaches with a hand too heavy, the Emperor says. Your fear is noble. It will also get you killed if you feed it the wrong food. What food would you recommend? Boromir asks, bitterness collapsed into curiosity. Responsibilities that cannot be solved by being the loudest person in the room, the Emperor says. Come drill with me at dawn. Gandalf approaches then, a question tucked behind his eyes like a coin saved for a better market. Do you think Providence knows you are here? The wizard asks. It does not need to, the Emperor says. I will align or be ignored. Either is acceptable. By nightfall, the company is named, though few understand what that name costs. Songs begin to be composed in the kitchens, which is how you know a plan has consent. The Emperor takes no place among the 9. He chooses the longer, broader road, to make the world wide enough for their path to exist. He begins with conversation and ends with a blueprint made out of people. In Gondor, he does not stride into the citadel and move pieces on maps. He walks the lowest wall and talks to the sentry, whose fingers split in the cold because gloves are rationed badly. He has the quartermaster recount supply chains until the man realizes where his assumptions are guesses and his guesses are habits. The Emperor does not invent gunpowder. He invents accountability. He organizes Gondor's companies into cohorts that understand themselves as parts of a body. 10 become 1. 10 ones become a fist. Shields are standardized to a width that allows for mutual cover. Spear lengths are matched, so ranks can interlock without stepping on their neighbor's rhythm. He appoints centurions not for nobility, but for the ability to speak a sentence that makes tired men less tired. Drills begin at dawn, but end with music, because people retain tactics better when their bodies associate them with something other than dread. He rewrites the beacon system without changing a single hill. Day signals are mirrored, precise. Night signals use shutters to shape phrases, not just alarms. In windless hours, pennants cut meaning into air. A lieutenant on a far ridge receives what he needs to know in a heartbeat instead of in an hour. It feels like magic. It is merely respect for time. He walks the stables at Edoras with a farrier who calls him "my lord" exactly once and then "you," because the Emperor asks questions that make a craftsperson forget to be deferential. The Rohirrim learn to wheel and break in concert, not as heroics stitched together by chance. Wedge formations become petals that open and close on command. Feints are rehearsed until enemy spears jab at ghosts. He does not lengthen their lances. He lengthens their attention spans in battle. He teaches a triad against dread that the smallest conscript can remember when lungs refuse air. Breathe. Name yourself. Act for the person on your left. The formula spreads faster than fear because men repeat it at cookfires to cruelly good effect. When Nazgul pass on low clouds and horses begin to scream, a captain shouts the first word, and the line shudders. but does not break. Breath creates seconds. Names anchor memory. Acting for the neighbor bypasses the paralysis of trying to be a hero. He works with healers behind the lines, showing them how to value hands over instruments, boiled water, clean bandages, triage that refuses spectacle. Treat the ones who will live if you touch them now, he says, and the mortality curve bends because compassion becomes strategic instead of performative. An old woman with a basket of herbs becomes as critical as a captain. The army begins to look at its own citizens as part of the strength instead of a burden. He visits smithies at night and speaks quality into iron. I do not need beauty, he tells the master of the third forge. I need sameness that a frightened hand can rely on. Arrowheads are standardized. Shafts are weighed. Fletchings are matched to wind. The first volleys after these changes look no different to the untrained eye. But an orc standard shield wall counts 7 more dead than it expects and shivers, and that shiver costs the enemy a minute, and somewhere in that minute a hobbit takes another step unseen. Logistics become an act of love. Supply depots are placed not for convenience, but for resilience, triangulated so that a raiding party cannot remove a whole artery with one lucky fire. Pack animals are cycled, not bled dry. Rations shift from hunger's arithmetic to endurance's calculus. Men who are not starving do not make promises to shadows. He drafts a doctrine he refuses to write down, because paper can be stolen, but culture has to be learned. Decentralized command becomes a living rumor. Every captain knows the intent of the day, not just the orders. If the plan breaks, the purpose does not. Soldiers who would once have panicked at a change of wind now adjust in the space between drum beats. In Rohan, he finds Eomer sharpening a sword with the expression of a man who will not outlive his oath if it comes to that. You fight like a song that knows only one verse, the Emperor says. Learn 2. What is the second? Eomer asks, half offended, half hopeful. Stop winning battles that leave you in the same war, the Emperor answers, and sets him problems in the sand with stones and twigs until the young marshal learns to count casualties as future farmers and riders and fathers, not as heroic arithmetic. He refuses the urge to fix everything. Theoden's illness is not his trial to steal. He leaves that to other counselors with other gifts. Denethor's pride is not his to humble. He writes letters that offer cooperation without condescension, and leaves space for Faramir to do the delicate work only a son can attempt. When lieutenants ask for astonishments, he gives them checklists. When chieftains ask for symbols, he gives them standards that mean something under stress. He makes terms with the allied peoples that sound at first like insults and become under pressure the foundations of trust. He will not take oaths of fealty to himself. He will not accept statues or hymns. He will take borrowed authority and give it back with interest. He will correct in private and praise in public. If they must choose between his plan and their dignity, they must choose their dignity, and he will write a new plan. This is not meekness. It is the math of a world that refuses to be saved at the price of its character. The Nazgul test the perimeters of this quiet revolution. They sweep low over a Gondorian column on the Pelinor's edge, expecting collapse. The first rank staggers. Yes, that will always be true of hearts. But then the triad ripples down the line. 1,000 chests inhale together. 1,000 names are spoken under breath like cords being tied. 1,000 spears lock. The Emperor stands at the hinge of the formation, not at the front. If they cannot stand without him, he has failed. And he lends them nothing but absence of panic. The ringwraiths bank away, annoyed at prey that has inexplicably evolved spines. He meets artisans and lawkeepers and midwives, not just warriors. Your work is not an intermission between battles, he tells a baker in the lower city, whose hands never stop, not even while listening. It is the reason battle must end. The baker nods, tears with flour in them. She brings extra loaves to the barracks at dusk and discovers that feeding men before they sleep simplifies tomorrow's courage. He teaches scouts to look for what plans depend on rather than what armies boast. A bridge's rhythm at night tells you more than its design by day. The smell of a camp's latrines will tell you how disciplined the enemy is, and thus how likely they are to pursue in order after a feigned rout. An army is a person. Learn its habits, and you can finish its sentences before it speaks them. He keeps his earlier constraint like a vow. No engines, no thunder guns. He is offered genius, bright young minds who want to give him fireworks and cleverness. He sends them back to the quiet work of making boots that do not blister and carts that do not break on the 3rd mile. He tells a prince who wants glory that the most important thing he can do this month is standardize the length of tent ropes so any unit can raise shelter without confusion. The prince storms off, then returns at dawn with a clipboard and a look like someone discovering that the world runs on grace disguised as tedium. And when leadership threatens to curdle into worship, he dissolves it with a sentence. A captain kneels. The emperor says, "Stand. I am not a shrine." A queen offers him a banner. He asks for her counsel instead. A crowd begins a chant. He interrupts with a joke so gentle that it returns them to themselves without shame. He does not make men fearless. He makes them faithful to one another. He does not make battles bloodless. He makes the blood mean something other than the price of a lord's story. He does not make victory inevitable. He makes possibility stubborn. Some nights he stands alone on a hill, looking east. The eye presses against the world like a thumb against a bruise. He lets it. He will not contest that gaze on those terms. Instead, he turns and looks west, and thinks of a hobbit stepping between stones, of a fellowship learning how to be a plural, of a city that might one day celebrate by being quiet for a whole week, because nobody needs to prove anything. In his camp ledger, next to the columns for grain and arrows and bandages, he writes a 4th line in a hand only he can read. How much dignity did we spend today? Then he goes to sleep without armor, because example scales faster than command. The first time he looks back, he does it in a way the enemy understands, not with stones or spies, but with intention shaped like a question. He climbs a tower because towers are where men go when they are trying to think taller than their fear. And he asks the steward's leave before he touches anything. A cloth lies over a black bowl of sight. The chamber is dark the way discipline is dark. No distractions, just walls and a window that shows too much horizon. "I will not uncover it," he tells the steward. "You may. I will stand with you while you look, and you will decide what part of what you see you believe." Denethor studies him like a chess problem, suspicious of any move that is both simple and kind. But sorrow has gnawed the steward thin. The offer of a witness that is not a rival is a novelty he cannot quite refuse. He draws the cloth. The stone wakes without light, a pressure in the air like thunder, deciding whether to declare itself. Denethor's fingers are steady because he has trained them to be, and the Emperor stands just behind his shoulder, not touching, lending no power, only keeping his own gathered in like sheathed steel. Through the Palantir's discipline, the eye presents its thesis. Armies like storms, iron on horizons, ships that do not carry help but hunger. There are truths here. There are also magnifications. The eye is a miser. It spends despair like coin, one precise clink at a time. Denethor makes a sound low in his throat. The Emperor speaks into the space where men usually panic. "Count," he says softly, "not impressions. Banners, formations, bridges. Look for what cannot disguise itself." Denethor obeys because numbers are older friends than pride. The eye shows him ruin. The Emperor helps him tally roads. The room is quiet, except for the work of seeing without being owned by what is seen. When they are done, Denethor steps back with a face that has remembered he is not just the father of a city's fear. He covers the stone with relief he disguises as contempt. "You are either a great comfort or a great lie," he says, not sure which would be worse. "I am a reminder," the Emperor says. "Even the enemy must use logistics. If you teach your captains to recognize freight more quickly than they recognize doom, you will begin to win ours back." He does not look again with the stone. He looks another way, through the unseen, which here is not a sewer of appetites, but a web of meaning. He asks a different question. Not, "What will you do to me?" but "What will you try?" The answer arrives as a pressure in the east like a weather front, intent clarifying into a gaze that is not sight exactly, more like demand. The eye is not a mind. It is decision that has forgotten how to be anything else. He meets it the only way that does not cede terms. He does not push. He stands. His will rises like a dawn does. Not all at once, not in a flare, but with the absolute patience of light, filling a room exactly as big as the room is. There is no drama to it. The eye hates that. It thrives on duels and noise. It wants a contest it can win by making the contest the whole of reality. The Emperor answers with a vow-shaped silence. He will not be drafted into a story whose end is already written. Across leagues, Nazgul move, 9 absences wearing shapes like threats wear coats. They circle above Osgiliath, trusting terror to soften the city before steel arrives. The first shriek rakes air. Men shudder, horses skitter. The skin on the back of the neck goes tight with a memory that isn't theirs. The Emperor is not in the gate. He is in the habit of 1,000 throats. He taught them the triad because it costs nothing and buys time. Breathe. Name yourself. Act for the person on your left. A captain, 23, with a scar he hides under the stubble he pretends not to trim, shouts the first word. 1,000 chests agree. The second word ripples like a blessing men permit themselves. Names spoken under breath, the math of memory becoming armor. The third word turns them outward. Spears lift and lock. The wraiths feel it, not as resistance but as refusal to be clay. They bank, not because they cannot kill, but because the kill will now be expensive and noisy and beneath their employer's dignity. On the Pelinor's edge, an older man with bitter courage, one who has told himself he is only doing this long enough to save enough people to stop, feels the shriek and does not drop his banner. He does not become brave, he becomes stubborn. That is enough. A boy behind him, too young to have earned any sky, looks up and then deliberately looks down at the knot he is tying in a sling. The enemy loses a heartbeat to incomprehension. Why are these small creatures not playing their part? In that stolen beat, far away, a hobbit takes another step without being seen. The eye swivels, like a man irritated by a fly, and then realizing the fly has intent. It presses. The Emperor does not press back. He allows himself to be seen as exactly as he is, a will that neither kneels nor postures. He offers no shadow to clutch. In a world where everything that looks like power tries to be a god, he plays the unbearable role, an adult. The eye narrows. It can scorch. It cannot comprehend. It flings storms toward the White City and gloom toward Rohan, searching for a sound it expects. The crack in morale that always comes when the mind is held like a throat. Instead, it finds coordination. Annoyance is not a word vast enough for what it feels, but the effect is the same. Its attention, which usually rests on everything at once because it does not respect particulars, must choose. It chooses the insult. It looks at him. He lets it. He opens his posture not to receive attack, but to make room for something else to move unseen. Gandalf feels it as a pressure change, the way a door opening changes a house. He glances south and smiles like a man who has just seen the one cloud he needed to see. In hills less groomed than old songs, two small figures feel a weight lift that they did not know had settled on them. They do not quicken. They do not look around. They do what brave people always do when given a reprieve. They steady their pace so they don't spend the gift all at once. Night brings the enemy's counter-proposal. If a sunrise refuses to be angered, send darkness that refuses to be dignified. Clouds thicken. Whispers rise in camps that were quiet yesterday. Rumors with teeth, the old sorcerer eyes of suspicion. The Emperor answers not with spectacle, but with proximity. He walks among cook fires and speaks to the men stirring stew and the girls mending harness, and the smith rubbing his palm because a new hammer has not yet made a home of his grip. He doesn't preach. He asks about their work until they remember it is sacred. Terror has trouble crossing a threshold where dignity is busy. When no one watches, when even captains think him asleep, he goes to a hill and refines his refusal. He takes every weapon of will he has honed across starless centuries and puts it back on the shelf, one by one. He keeps only what this world will accept without deforming. Example: steadiness. The light that isn't light that makes a room easier to tell the truth in. The eye comes again, impatient. He lets it glare until it bores itself with its own certainty. That too is a tactic. From the west, a thought brushes him like a robe passing behind a door. He does not turn. He nods. This is not complicity. It is courtesy between workers who share a building and different jobs within it. Then he goes back to sleep, because he has taught his body to do so under any sky, and because rest is a weapon here too. In the deep underrooms of the world, the old fire wakes, because the fellowship has arrived at the place where songs remember their first bad idea. The Emperor is not with them. He would not put his gravity on their path. But he has been listening to the unseen, long enough now to hear the strain tighten 5 valleys away, like a wire about to sing the wrong note. He moves. No trumpet, no light. Just a presence that refuses to scuff the floor as it passes. Moria is not a ruin to him. It is a ledger of love and error written in stone. He feels the dwarves here not as ghosts, but as habits persistently refusing to die. The meticulousness in the angle of a staircase, the funny arrogance of a door that requires a riddle to admit what a hammer could demand. The drums start. They are not instruments, but declarations. The fellowship runs. He does not catch them. He joins the problem at its neck. On the bridge, the world narrows because sometimes the world must. Stone arches darkness with all the confidence of craftsmen who never imagined their work would witness this. A thing of shadow and flame comes tall from below with a body made of hunger, given a weapon. It is not a demon in the sense he understands from the warp. It is not a tumor of thought and teeth. It is a person who said yes to the wrong music. So long ago, he has forgotten the word no. Gandalf stands where he must stand. The Emperor steps not in front of him but beside him, half a pace behind, like a father teaching a son to drive and keeping one finger near the wheel to correct without stealing the lesson. He speaks without sound, the language of those who have already agreed not to humiliate one another with speech in emergencies. "This is yours," he tells the wizard. "I will change the terms, not the trial." Gandalf's mouth twitches as if at a joke he hasn't the breath to tell. He lifts his staff. The Balrog lifts his whip. The unseen around them snarls with the friction of discord forced into form. The Emperor does not command. He remembers. He remembers being between hungry suns, persuading a hysteria of energy to become a star that did not eat its young. He remembers binding radiation into patience. He remembers coaxing a line of music that did not want to be sung yet into a melody someone could live under. He lays that memory like a cloak over the fire spirit, not to smother, but to remind it of the shape of its original job. For a heartbeat, the Balrog quivers with recognition the way a drunk man quivers when someone says his given name. The whip pauses mid-arc, a tendril of flame shaking like a hand trying to steady. The stone under the thing's feet stops sweating from heat. Even the darkness around it seems embarrassed to be so theatrical. "Return," the Emperor says, not a command, an invitation. "Not to me. To the music you betrayed." The creature remembers the first light it saw, before anger taught it to trade wonder for power. It hates the feeling. To be recalled is to be near shame. It chooses instead the clarity of ruin. The whip cracks down. Gandalf meets it with a staff that has learned in 100 kitchens and 1,000 crossroads to be exactly as stubborn as hope needs to be at the moment hope is cheapest. The bridge breaks. It was designed to do so, not as a trap, but as a promise that some trials will always be personal. The Balrog falls. Its whip lashes. It catches. Gandalf is taken with it by his own faithfulness. That is what always drags the good into the dark. Not folly, but commitment. The Emperor moves the only way that does not ruin the lesson. He does not arrest the fall. He gives it a different flavor. He wraps Gandalf in a memory of air, strong enough to turn velocity into descent and descent into pilgrimage. "You will not go alone," he says, not to claim partnership, but to refuse abandonment. The wizard's eyes widen with a complicated gratitude. He is still dying. He is not being thrown away. They fall through chambers that never wanted to be seen by anyone but their makers and their god. The Balrog burns with every reason it ever had to hate. The Emperor walks the edge of the fight without stepping in. He lends no blow. He unhooks small tragedies. The stone that would have shattered the spine becomes a glancing bruise. The ripple of heat that would have boiled bone becomes a blister. He is not saving a life. He is salvaging a meaning. Far above, on the bridge's ruin, the Fellowship stands at the ragged edge of obedience. Aragorn's breath comes like a man giving orders to himself. Legolas stares with the furious helplessness of immortals witnessing mortal timing. The hobbits' faces shrink with an emotion too complex for children to process. Grief mixed with the knowledge that they cannot stop to honor it. The Emperor lets the living agony of their choice pass through him and does nothing to ease it. Their story will not survive a theft of cost. Below, the Balrog hits a lake that forgot it was water and learned to be mirror and trap. Steam coughs up like a brood of angry birds. Gandalf is Fa and Ash and Will. The Emperor stands in the steam, with him long enough to thread a path through it, not touching the staff, not taking the burden. "You have work beyond this," he says without saying it. He lays one thin ribbon of what he is around the wizard's ragged purpose. No glory, only continuity. So that when death closes its hand, it finds a thread it cannot break. It is the smallest gift he can give that is not interference, the possibility of coming back as the same person who left, only truer. The fight climbs a stair of stone older than excuses. It ends on a peak the world set aside for days that matter and for winds that remember their jobs. The two ancient things meet without audience. Flame against patience, whip against word. The Emperor witnesses. He does not award. When Gandalf's last strength tears the enemy open from within, with a sentence fit to end a chapter, the mountain answers with an honesty nothing in the deep can counterfeit. Gandalf falls again, this time into the place where officers are reassigned. The Emperor does not follow. He cannot. That door is not his. He leaves what memory he laid, the little rope, and walks back through passages that have begun to mourn the feet that will never again run across them. He finds the Fellowship on the far side of grief, which is to say, still moving. He does not say he is sorry, because the apology belongs to a different story. He does not comfort, because comfort now is a kind of theft. He gives them water. He shows them a path that buys them hours without costing them their own courage. He looks at Frodo long enough to communicate the only thing that matters. "I saw, and I did not take your burden." Then he is gone, not into drama, into the work he chose, holding the eye whenever it looks his way, making room where room is needed, interrupting only the parts of disaster that would prevent meaning from being born. In the tower, the steward stares at a covered stone and decides not to look tonight. On the Pelennor, a tired boy finishes tying the sling knot and finds he has hands again. In the mountains, where a grey shape will one day walk out of death in a color he did not wear before, a thin thread holds until it is not needed. The enemy rages. The sun, which is not his sun, keeps showing up anyway. Lothlorien receives the weary as a mother receives fevered children, without panic, with cool hands, by lowering the temperature of their thoughts. He walks under the golden canopy not as a conqueror in a cathedral, but as a student in a library that grew leaves. The unseen here is a quiet so articulate it almost speaks his language. Elves move as if they are on time with a metronome no one else can hear. He feels himself already being tested, not by traps, but by standards. When Galadriel comes, she does not announce her power. She announces her attention. It is more unnerving. They walk without guards, which is its own kind of guard. She shows him the mirror in a clearing tuned like an instrument. Water lies in a basin fashioned as if glass had remembered it used to be a river. "It will show what it shows," she says, a statement and a caution. He does not ask for the future. He asks for the lie he is most likely to believe. The surface accepts the assignment with a professionalism that makes him like it. A city rises in the bowl, Minas Tirith made efficient, its alleys corrected into grids, its markets scheduled by merit instead of human need. Crime gone because choice has been simplified until only obedience remains. Songs shorter because too many harmonies have been declared redundant. There are no beggars. There are no accidents. There are also no surprises. He sees a schoolroom where a child learns to be perfect by being afraid to be anything else. He recognizes the architecture. He has built versions of it before, with the best intentions money can't buy. He shows her his own mirror. Not water, not vision, but a memory. He offers her terror without sentimentality. A sky so choked with prayer that it stopped letting light in. Saints minted by the press of propaganda. 1 billion citizens kept fed on narratives because bread was not always possible. A civilization that survived because it forgot to ask what it was surviving for. He does not justify. He inventories. He lets the smell of ash do the work that words cannot. "You could become a god here if you made the wrong kind of kindness," Galadriel says. It is not an accusation. It is a diagnosis. "And you could become a goddess by doing nothing while mortals drown politely," he answers. He does not smile when he says it, because he isn't flirting. They are two surgeons discussing an operation that kills as often as it saves. She tests him without cruelty. "Do you desire worship?" "I desire outcomes," he says. "Worship gets in the way. People who kneel stop telling you the truth." Then, because precision matters, he adds, "I will not pretend I have never used it as a tool. I will not use it here. This world punishes shortcuts with a thoroughness I respect." She shows him other futures, a crown on his brow and peace that tastes like sleep, a ring on his hand and victory that tastes like anesthesia. He shows her other memories, his armies organized like prayers said too loudly, sapience turned into resources because disaster demanded counting. The forest listens and refuses to be impressed by either of them. Lothlorien does not reward nobility. It rewards discipline. "What gift would you take?" she asks, following an old custom and also insulting it by making it serious. "Constraint," he says, and means it. "A binding I put on myself in your presence, so that later when I am tired, I cannot untie it easily." She considers him as one judge considers another. "Then take this, the knowledge that if you dominate this song, it will spit you out. If you harmonize, it will let you stay. It is an invisible gift, and therefore heavy." He bows as one artisan to another, and leaves Lorien wearing no trinket, only a promise that feels more like a ring than the ring ever could. He speaks to the fellowship as they depart, using as few words as a good teacher can manage. To the elf, do not confuse endurance with necessity. To the dwarf, do not confuse stubbornness with faithfulness. To the men, do not confuse speed with decision. To the hobbits, the only instruction he dares give, eat when you can, because logistics begins with bread. To the grey pilgrim, who will not be grey for long, he gives a look that says, I will not be in your way, and receives one that says, you may be in mine if you ever try. He leaves Lorien with the quiet that settles after a vow has been made, and finds that vows make marching easier. Words weigh less than armor when you believe them. He keeps his hands off levers. He teaches men to make better levers. Minas Tirith learns to breathe differently. The city wakes to find that purpose has been laid out on tables like bread, sorted, sliceable, shareable. He begins with corridors because ideas move where people do. Narrow stairs that bottleneck troops in a panic are widened by removing ornament, which wounds no one. Markets are redirected so a siege doesn't starve mothers first. The Ramaz is respected, not worshipped. It is a line to deploy from, not a wall to hide behind. The first time a sortie returns on time and under strength because they had a schedule as well as courage, a citizen says aloud in surprise, "Oh." And that is the sound of a culture turning its first corner. He keeps his promise to not introduce fires the forest cannot survive. No engines, no powders. But he brings the kind of magic that looks like paperwork, rosters that reward skill instead of proximity, rotations that send the same men to die less often, a doctrine of relief that refuses to treat the wounded as a tax on glory. He standardizes the spear so that, in a storm of screams, a soldier's hand finds familiarity and steadies. He puts a trumpet call to the triad, so even those who cannot read can remember. 1 note for breathe, 2 for name yourself, 3 for act for the person on your left. The sound gets into the bones of the White City's defenders, the way salt gets into a sailor. The Witch King comes under a sky painted for despair. He brings a habit of inevitability, so practiced it has become a power. He expects men to lower their eyes because prophecy has pre-written their posture. He finds instead captains who have been taught to be bored by myths if those myths do not help with this hour's job. He descends on the Pelennor and stills horses with a thought. The horses shake, shudder, and then do what trained horses do. Look at their riders. Riders breathe because they have been taught that breathing is not optional. It is the liturgy that opens every other prayer. He enters the city's air not as a scream, but as a pressure. He expects to be the only grammar in the sentence. He is surprised to find grammar already present. Gandalf's white light cuts lines into the fog. But it is not alone. The Emperor has not made a wall. He has made a habit, and habits are harder to shatter than stone. Men do not cheer. They perform. Denethor does not burn. He almost does. There is a night when the steward sits with lamp oil and a decision, and the palantir turned away. His eyes roar from counting truths. The eye has sharpened into weapons. Faramir lies beached on a bed between worlds, like a man almost persuaded to stay underwater. The Emperor does not take the lamp from Denethor's hand. He stands in the doorway and talks of inventory until the steward is either bored into sanity or saved by insult. "If you leave," the Emperor says, "you will shirk work you trained yourself your whole life to do." The cruelty lands because it is not cruel. It is respect in a tone that does not coddle. Denethor lowers the lamp with a gasp. that is almost a sob, because surviving pride is the hardest pride there is. Éowyn rides with a secret under her skin, like a knife wrapped in cloth. Merry rides with her, small enough to be overlooked by prophecy the way a hairline crack is overlooked until the ship sinks. The Witch King finds them on ground, set aside for sentences to end. His contempt is procedural. It is not personal. He does not believe in persons. He announces the rule that has kept his courage counterfeit for an age. No living man can hinder me. It is a phrase with math in it, and bad math at that. Éowyn answers with the correct arithmetic, and a swing full of all the chores she has been denied doing. Merry's blade finds what it was forged in the dark to find. The Emperor does not touch this moment with his will. He removes only what suffocates, the stale hand of destiny pressing on the back of the necks in the air. When the witch-fear loosens a fraction because a culture refused it, the strike lands true, and the sky corrects itself. A scream ends that had become a weather pattern, and men suddenly remember the second verse of every song. After, the city does not roar. It exhales, the way a limb aches when the tourniquet comes off. He walks the lower circles, while others take inventories of heroes. He thanks a baker for obeying the new ration schedule, when it would have been easy to cheat in kindness. He sits with a stable boy, who did not flee when a horse kicked, and who kept the animal from breaking its leg in panic. He speaks to Faramir, as if Faramir has always already recovered, and in that tone the body often remembers what to do. He holds at a distance the people who would make him a statue, because nothing corrupts a city like a public square that would be better spent as a well. Night, then plans, then dawn, then other people's courage. He does not hoard the victory for a speech. He turns it into more logistics. The Rohirrim are folded into a machine that produces not awe, but relief. Messages fly along shutters and pennants, gossip repurposed into intel. It looks like magic from a distance. Up close, it looks like chores. They march east, not because they are certain, but because certainty is usually a lie, and someone must go anyway. The Black Gate is a mouth meant for swallowing. It opens with a theater actor's timing. The host that stands before it is smaller than legends prefer. It is on purpose. He would rather give the enemy the insult of contemptible numbers and the agony of being forced to pay attention. He takes his place where standards matter, not on the front line where arms decide, not in the back where maps lie. He stands where eyes are most likely to look when they want to know if the world is ending today. He lets them see a man doing nothing but standing well. He lays his will out like a canopy, not over men, but over meanings. He does not shield their bodies, he sharpens their choice. To the eye, he is a stillness it cannot metabolize. Habit meets ethic and finds no purchase. The eye tries fury, then scorn, then the ancient trick of showing possible losses as facts. He answers each with the same refusal. I will not use your vocabulary. He does not wrestle it. He bores it. The boredom of tyrants is costly. They spend attention they would rather hoard. In Mordor, a road the size of a thought holds two small lives moving at the speed of pain. Frodo finally cannot. He breaks as designed. Gollum arrives like a clause attached to an old sentence that everyone had forgotten to read out loud. Teeth, fall, fire, the simple physics of a story finally refusing to be argued with. The Emperor does not intervene. He lets mercy be the author it is here. The mountain opens its throat and coughs up an age. The eye feels itself reduced to its appropriate dimensions, too small to be a sky, too large to be a man, and then is neither. Towers shed meaning and remember that they are rocks. The ground performs alignments it has owed itself for centuries. His dome collapses because there is no reason for a dome when a storm has decided to be over. He spends his attention immediately on the work that follows all miracles, not praises, but withdrawals. He keeps the host from dying of its own relief by sending them home in an order the land can endure. He gives orcs room to run if they will run, and receive quarter if they are too tired to do anything but fall. Some drop their weapons like men setting down a lie. Some do not, and are dealt with by men who have learned that mercy is not denial, but sequence. He waits at the edge of ruin for the moment after the moment. It comes quickly, a gust of laughter at an absurd time, because someone falls in mud and someone else is suddenly 18 again. He smiles at that, and only that. Then he turns away so the legend can close its own book without him writing his name in the margin. Cities do what cities do after sieges. They develop a new appetite for undramatic tasks. Coronation Day is set because even the most practical peoples require symbols to carry their decisions safely from one year to the next. He attends not as spectacle, but as witness. Aragorn stands with the calm of a man who has practiced being criticized for years longer than his enemies have practiced yelling. The crown moves from hand to head the way a tool moves from bench to palm. The city, which is smarter than any of its inhabitants, decides to believe in itself again. He is offered everything that would ruin him. Banners, hymns, a temple. There is even a faction that argues he should become a saint because they do not have a better category for a person who kept refusing to make them stupider. He declines as if they have asked him whether he would like a second dessert after a funeral. He does not scold. He gives assignments. Name your streets after the midwives who stayed during the siege, he says. Write the losses on stone where you cannot help reading them when you go to market. To the masons, make your stairs safer. To the council, make boredom legal again. To the king, a private sentence that weighs as much as any sword. Your job is not to be necessary. He visits the Shire without being seen, not because he believes in their privacy, but because their privacy believes in them. He watches a gardener lay out a row of beans with the same seriousness with which men lay out armies. He blesses nothing. He interferes not at all. He leaves the triad with a miller as a way to calm children during storms, and the miller never knows who began it, only that it works. He walks with Galadriel one last time, not in Lorien, but on a hill where the wind has given up trying to be important. "What did you ask of the West?" she says, because she knows he asked, and because she is polite enough not to ask whether he received. "I asked whether love requires leaving a hand on the door," he says. "I was told that love requires leaving the door." He does not say who told him, because he doesn't know. The answer arrived in the way truths do here, musically, without a signature. He speaks with Gandalf in a courtyard where pigeons have made peace with sermons. They share the kind of conversation that looks like silence from far away. "You did not save me," Gandalf says, a thank you phrased as a correction. "No," the Emperor answers. "I remembered you. It is the best anyone can do for anyone." Aragorn offers him a place at table, then a wing of the palace, then a law. He refuses the first two. The third he accepts only because laws outlast good moods. The law is simple, almost petty, that no statue of him will be raised while any road in the city is dangerous to walk at night. The law is passed. The roads become safe with suspicious speed. People discover they are better at maintaining decency than carving heroes. He goes to the sea the way a man goes to a grave of someone he loved and failed and loved anyway. The shore smells like beginnings pretending to be endings. He speaks aloud because the sky has liked him better when he has been honest. I could remain, he says. I could teach an age. I could keep the triad alive until it is no longer needed, and then a little longer because fear will never not be clever. The waves answer in their own speech, which is to keep coming without being impressed by his categories. He laughs at himself, not with self-hatred, but with the relief of a man who has finally met a limit he likes. He steps into thunder, because thunder is where he came from, and because leaving dramatically is easier to digest for those who require a shape to put absence into. Others say he walked west on the water until the horizon decided to put him behind it. Others that he turned left on a farm road and became a rumor that visits people who are about to do the right thing and are terrified of being alone. He does not correct any of these because stories are a currency that buys courage when coin is scarce. He leaves behind nothing that can be worshipped and many things that can be used. A standard that is no cloth at all, but a behavior anyone can wear. Stand where eyes will look and do nothing except be calm. A doctrine that fits in a child's mouth. Breathe. Name yourself. Act for the person on your left. A constraint dressed as a gift. Do not add a note to the world's music, unless you have learned the key. Galadriel knows exactly one thing about his departure that others do not. It is not the method. It is the question he carried like a stone in the pocket of his heart, and the answer that made him smile in a way only craftspeople smile when they meet a better craftsperson. To love a world, he had repeated after hearing it, is to leave it free. She says nothing of it to anyone because some truths are weakened by being repeated too eagerly. Minas Tirith forgets him just enough to get on with its chores. Rohan tells jokes about him that improve in the retelling. The Shire never learns his name and thereby keeps what he came to protect. In the great schools that will rise because boredom became legal again, teachers ask children to recite the single sentence written on the first page of the first reader. Remember yourselves. The children do, or try, and that is how empires do not happen where they are not needed. He becomes what all good answers become when their work is over, a question other people can ask in his absence. When power knocks, loud, polite, promising, men and women in this world will stand in doorways and, without knowing why they learned to, inquire in a tone utterly practical. Will this make us easier to organize and harder to love? If the answer is yes, they will close the door. And somewhere, wherever he has gone, a man who once could have been a god and chose instead to be a standard will permit himself that rarest of indulgences, the feeling that the work, for once, stayed done. And so our thought experiment closes not with a trumpet blast, but with the soft click of a door left gently ajar. In a world of rings and riddles, a stranger who could have been a god chose to be something harder, a standard. Not a symbol to kneel before, but a posture to copy, calm where eyes would look, steady where panic would like to live, disciplined enough to say no to the quickest yes. He measured a universe authored by song and decided to sing along rather than conduct. He took inventory of his own strength and chose the one kind that doesn't leave scorch marks, the kind that makes other people stronger. Look back across the journey, and the pattern becomes plain. Every place the Emperor might have seized a lever, he checked the grain of the wood instead. In Rivendell, he refused the perfect instrument that would hollow out its player. In Lothlorien, he asked for a gift no one could wear, a constraint, and left with a vow that weighed more than any jewel. In the White City, he swapped miracles for checklists, because the unglamorous chores of decency are what keep the world from bleeding out between great battles. At the Black Gate, he denied the Eye a duel and gave his own people something rarer than courage, a reason for it that would still make sense tomorrow. If you tilt the story, you can see its second spine. How often smallness does the heavy lifting. A hobbit's hand, a baker's schedule, a stable boy's nerve, a captain's 3-word drill. Breathe. Name yourself. Act for the person on your left. It was never an anthem for heroes. It was a memory aid for ordinary mornings. Yet when the sky grew loud, it turned into an economy of hope that spent itself wisely. The ring was unmade by accident with a long setup. Mercy kept at room temperature finally boiled when it mattered. And the Emperor, who could have bent the line with a gesture, chose to keep his hands by his sides and let the music resolve on its own terms. What remains after the thunder is done? Roads made safer than statues, laws that outlast good moods, formations that keep fear from becoming policy, and a rumor that the most powerful person anyone met refused to become a king because he liked schools and bakers too much to tell them what songs to sing. You can imagine the ways the story will be embellished in taverns and thrones and kitchens. Some will swear he walked into the sea and never sank. Others will insist he turned left at a hedge and now visits people only when they are about to do the right thing and just need to know they're not alone. But the truth is quieter. He left nothing you can worship and many things you can use. There's an argument hidden inside that choice, and it isn't just about fantasy worlds. It's about ours. We keep meeting rings, polished promises that say, "Let me simplify this for you." They live in our politics, our technologies, our appetites, our need to be told we're safe if we hand over the long, boring work of staying human. This "what if" invites a harder question than, "What would you do with absolute power?" It asks, "What levers will you refuse so that other people remain people when you're done?" It asks whether your victories produce citizens or furniture. It wonders if your outcomes would taste like anesthesia, and it answers with a posture, not a policy. Notice how the story handles destiny. Prophecies surface, titles clink, banners rise. And yet the final terms are always human scale. Éowyn's grammar lesson at the gate. Merry's blade in the seam no one saw until it mattered. Frodo's collapse, which the tale had the honesty to expect, and Gollum's terrible usefulness, which Mercy kept available by not crushing him earlier. The Emperor's most decisive acts were refusals. He refused the ring, refused the duel, refused the crown, refused to replace providence with process. In each refusal, something else could breathe. The world stayed plural. The day after the victory belonged to people who still had their names. If you listen closely, you can hear what Galadriel gave him echoing through it all. A key, not a sword. Harmonize, and the world will let you stay. He set his enormous will to that pitch, and discovered the one kind of influence that doesn't rot the hands that hold it. He did not raise new gods. He taught men to standardize spearheads and gratitude. He took the glamour out of leadership and replaced it with maintenance. And he made boredom legal again, because boredom is what societies earn when their emergencies have grown up. Maybe that's the surprising tenderness of this what if, the way it rehabilitates the ordinary. It suggests that the tallest use of power is to make room for smaller powers to be themselves. It imagines a savior who saves by resisting the urge to save everything, a strategist who plans around the dignity of his pieces, an immortal who finally trusts time. It reminds us that providence, call it Eru, history, God, or the better angel of your neighbor's habit, prefers to work with hands that don't insist on being the only hands in the frame. And for us, back on this side of the page, the takeaway isn't mystical, it's managerial. You don't need a palantir to see which of your choices will turn friends into followers and neighbors into numbers. You can test your levers right now with a sentence the Emperor left behind, like a carpenter's pencil mark. Will this make us easier to organize and harder to love? If the answer is yes, you're holding a ring, not a tool. Put it down. Ask for a constraint. Write a checklist. Teach a triad to someone who shakes when the sky gets loud. Because somewhere, always, a world is singing under the noise we make, and the only way to join it without doing harm is to keep time with what's already true. Leave fewer scorch marks. Exchange miracles for maintenance. Be the standard in the place eyes will look. Then get out of the way. If that sounds small, good. Small is where victories survive. Small is where meaning doesn't need microphones. Small is the only scale on which love can be accounted for, line by line, loaf by loaf, breath by breath. The Emperor knew it by the end. He asked the West if love requires leaving a hand on the door, and learned, to his relief, that love requires leaving the door. So carry that forward. When fear's weather rolls in, do what his soldiers did in the shadow of wings and crowns. Breathe. Name yourself. Act for the person on your left. When you're offered a faster road at the price of someone else's voice, remember Lothlorien's unglamorous gift. When you feel the old hunger to be necessary, hear a king being told that his job is not to be. And when the story gives you the chance to be a god, choose instead to be a standard. That's the ending this world keeps earning. Not a god who stays, but a habit that does. Remember yourselves.